Hey, welcome back to the standard course. This is actually lesson 2.6, but it doesn't really matter. Today we're going to be talking about error handling in NLN, right? How to handle errors, like, because you're going to get a lot of errors, a ton of errors. Um, Most people will see those errors and they'll be like, oh my god, like, I don't know what to do. But if you can sort of plan out your workflows in a way that will sort of make errors, like whether they come or not, it'll, like if you plan out your workflow so that you build with errors in mind, then you'll win. um, you might not understand what that means right now, but I'm going to explain it to you. Let's just dive in. So the thing you need to understand more than anything is the fact that even the best automations break and glitch. This is something you cannot avoid, right? um, Something happens, maybe the server that you're getting the information from, something is happening there, something breaks on that end. Something happened when you were trying to do some data representation. Maybe it was a human error, or maybe it was an error in your workflow that represented data in the wrong way, right? Things just don't work sometimes, and like that's okay, right? You do have solutions, right? So one of the solutions that you have is the stop and error node. So this is a node that you can use to stop the workflow when something goes wrong, or when you need like some kind of custom condition. So imagine the case of you catching an error and then stopping it. So that would be a logical condition. So you'd use a node like an if node or a switch node. Right. This is something like pulling an emergency brake. So what the stop and error node, and you'll see this soon because like we're going to be building something out. What the stop and error node allows you to do is it allows you to configure your workflow so that you can send yourself a specific type of error message. And this is very useful when you're trying to log errors, because like if you can track what part of the workflow had the error, you'll be able to make better decisions when you're trying to fix it. So how the stop and error node works is very simple, right? Imagine you are building out a workflow and then something breaks, right? Like all those examples I gave you before. You have critical data missing, that would be a logical condition. You have a connection failure, that would be another logical condition. You have downstream issue prevention, that could be another condition, right? So you, like anytime you have one of those conditions, anytime you have one of those test points, remember when we were speaking about like all the things you need to think about when you're trying to plan out or build your workflow. It's triggers, steps, test points, recurrences, and outputs, right? You can customize your error messages for easy debugging later on. So yeah, something else you probably need to understand is error workflows. And again, these are very useful. So an error workflow will activate whenever the associated workflow crashes or gets an error. So you can log errors, you can notify team members, you can retry tasks automatically after waiting for a bit of time. We're going to cover how this looks like later on, but you're starting to understand, right? So if you have a stop and error node that's sending a specific sort of error message, and then you have an error workflow that catches that error message and then does something specific with it based on some condition, you could have like a really robust way of dealing with like really sort of high level advanced conditions where you don't know what to do, but like your automation can automatically handle things like even when you're not around. We're going to like run through this just to like understand how it works, but like as long as you understand sort of the vision, then you'll be able to realize like everything that's possible with this. So error workflows matter because you want to build systems that respond to failure even when you're not around. Like imagine something fails while you're asleep. um, a normal person might just wake up, right? But if you built your sort of workflow to handle things without you, sort of like maybe retrying after some time, or sending messages to people who are actually awake at that time, right? You can build smarter workflows that are both resilient and adaptable, and that's the power of like stop and error nodes and error workflows. And we're gonna run through it just to show you. But yeah, now we're going to actually do the hands-on demo. Right. What we're going to do, the trigger is going to be when an error occurs, and the steps are going to be we're going to use a stop and error node to send an error message, and then in the error workflow we're going to log the error in the in the Airtable, and then we're going to send an email to us to alert us that something happened, right? So basically what we want to get out of this is an error log, a basic like error log, and there are no loops or recurrences for this, so we don't really need to think about that. But the test points that we do need to understand is basically for every test point in the workflow, we have to have a stop and error node that will basically be making sure that things don't go broken. Right. Let me stop yapping and let me just get to it. So yeah, I have opened up a very, you've seen this before. It's the canvas, right? A new workflow, literally has the default name over here. I'm going to call this error workflow because I want to show you the error workflow, the error trigger, like how it actually works. So I'm going to call this error workflow. And then I'm going to add the error trigger here. So I'm just going to search error. So the error trigger is something very special because it will only trigger when there's an error in another workflow. It's like kind of like an execute sub workflow kind of like sort of node, but you don't manually sort of like put in a manual like an execute sub workflow node. It'll just cache things in whatever sort of workflow you're working on. So you have to understand how this is going to work, because if you don't configure it properly, it's not going to catch anything. So it'll only trigger when there's a node in another workflow, as long as that workflow is set up to do so. Remember, that's very important. Now let's go set it up. So remember, this error trigger is going to activate, and then it's going to do certain things. So it's going to log the error in the Airtable, as we said. It's also going to send a message. We're going to do that afterwards, but for now let's go back and find sort of a simple workflow that we're going to start logging errors from. So we'll save this and then we'll go back to the overview. We might create another workflow just for demo purposes, and again we're going to set this as a manual trigger, right? And then we could have sort of like, imagine some kind of conditions, some kind of things happening right in between, but you could have like a condition here where you are stopping and erroring. So this is the stop and error node, right? You can have different types of errors, right? You can have an error message or an error object. An error object is very useful if you want to have like higher level sort of capacities. So think about it in this way. How REST APIs are set up is like they have different kinds of like error codes that you can set up. So there's like error code 200, which is probably like the success code. There's error code 400 or something, which might be like an error. There's error code 500 or something. Like there's all these different error codes, and only like the API itself, like only the internals and anyone else who's using the API understands what those error codes actually mean. So you could have error codes, you could have error messages. If you want to sort of establish like the error codes, you would come in here and then set them up sort of like that JSON object. So like this, and then you could have error code here. And then you could just be like 200, and then you could have the error message. Okay, let me just call it message instead, because that feels more intuitive. Something went wrong. Right. That's just simple, very easy. That is the stop an error, how you could set up an error object. But what we're going to do in this case is set up an error message. And this is like the simplest way to do it. So if you understand, if you're maybe building something scalable, you might set up an error object, because it would have different sort of, you could have different sort of stop and error nodes with all these different error codes that you could use later on to specify what kinds of execution lines you want to run in your error trigger workflow. So like, I hope you understand this. It's very powerful. Like when you start building these very scalable sort of N8N workflows that can work sort of without you even running, sort of like they can retry after a certain amount of time, or they can do certain things like based on conditions, you start realizing the power. Like it's so incredible. But yeah, right now we're going to do a very simple error message that says something went wrong. again, I seem to like that. I seem to like this error message very much. So this is the error message. Now we know that it's going to run, so this could be any kind of trigger, but it's going to run any sort of sequence of nodes. Just imagine this like some sequence of nodes, something happens here. And then it's going to stop an error. Like the one thing you have to understand about the stop and error node is that it literally stops. There's nothing that comes out after it. There's no data flow after. So this stops an errors. But if we just run this right now, what you'll notice is that nothing will happen. Let me actually save this. I'll call it error demo. Okay. So if we run this right now, we'll just test the workflow. What you'll notice is that it'll stop an error and then it'll give us this error, something went wrong. Okay, this is fine. But when we go back to the overview, and then we'll try to find we'll try to find the error workflow we just set up. If we had connected them properly, we would have seen something in the executions, but there's literally nothing here yet, which tells us that we didn't connect them properly. So how we connect that is we have to come in here and then we have to go into these three dots, the workflow settings, I guess you could say. We find the settings and then we have to specify the error workflow, because right now it's saying that there's no workflow connected to this. So we'll set the error workflow to this error workflow over here, and then we'll save. And now when we test this out, it's gonna stop an error again, but when we go back to the error workflow, we're going to find something in the executions, and it's going to show right here. Okay, it's taking like a bit of time, unfortunately, and we can only use a okay, now I understand what happened. We need to come in here and we have to change the trigger type. So like as I said before, documentation is everything. Okay, so we'll use a special type of trigger. I guess we'll call it the cron node, or I guess it's the schedule trigger. What we're going to have this do is we're going to have it schedule like every few seconds, maybe every 60 seconds. I guess 30 seconds is fine. Let me make this 10 just to speed it up. I'm going to connect this to the stop and error node. Just imagine there's like a bunch of things here. And I'm going to set this to active, and then we got it over here. Okay, so let me come back here. That should be like counting down and doing its thing. Let's come back here to the error workflow, and we're going to check the executions just to see. Oh, there we go, it already started. So that was the problem. The problem was the fact that we were executing it manually, and that was why it was crying. So now every 10 seconds it's going to create a new sort of instance of activating this error trigger. Let's go and see. Actually, we should probably just go and stop that from executing every single time. Okay, let's come back in here, and then we'll start to sort of understand like what actually goes into the output. I'm going to copy this to the editor just to like have it get pinned over here, and then we'll see what's going on. So it gives us an execution object, right, with a bunch of information on like which URL it's from and the error, like the level is warning, and then it has a bunch of tags that apparently don't exist. But yeah, functionality is regular, the name is node operation error. So there's like a bunch of information here on not only the workflow that the error happened in, but also the type of error that was happening. So like the level is warning, so if it was like a critical error, it would have that kind of error type. It would have that kind of error level, like everything planned out. So you start understanding here just the levels of customization that you could put in, just based on the error level. Like you could have different execution lines for that. And yeah, we have the parameters as well that we wanted to send in. So the error type was the error message, and then here we'd have something went wrong. And again, remember we could set up an error object. This would also be coming in here as well. It would be like a error code and an error message, just like this, which is like very very powerful. It even gives you the node that was like the node that it came from, which is the stop and error, which is the node that you're probably going to be using when you're trying to catch errors anyway. But yeah, it's very powerful. It even gives you the position of the node in the workflow itself. Very very powerful. Um, and it gives you the error message. It gives you the error stack, which is very useful for tracking what happened, like specifically. Um, and yeah, like this is very 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 powerful. So now we'll leave this data pinned. Let's start setting up error logging. Since now we know that every time that that workflow is going to error, is going to drag in the information over here. What we can do is we can log the error in an Airtable. So I'm going to just create a record in an Airtable. And sorry about that. It's very loud today. I mean, it's very loud every day, but it is what it is. It's just like when you live close to the roads, you know. So yeah, we're going to just find. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here, and we're going to we're just going to go into that base, and we're going to set up an error sort of table. Error tables are very useful when you're trying to catch errors. What I normally do is I set up an error table along with an automation table. So imagine logging everything that happens in an automation. Like whenever an automation kicks off, you could have a log, like a webhook at the end that sends or you could have an Airtable sort of a create record node that creates the record of everything that happened in the workflow itself, whether it succeeded, whether it failed, and so on and so forth. We're gonna come in here and we're gonna just create an error table. So as you can tell, this is like my content transformer. It's the base that I use to create content and then just push it online. We're gonna start from scratch. You're gonna learn more about Airtable in the future. If you're part of the right group, you might learn a bit about it in the main group, but I think if you're in the guild, you're gonna learn a lot from Airtable, and you're gonna get more access to me. I'm gonna be teaching you Airtable as well. But yeah, let's move on. So we're gonna name this table errors and automations, I guess. And we're gonna save this. So here we're going to change this to an error code, I guess. Or maybe an error ID is much better. So error ID, this is going to be a formula, but we can leave this just like this, because what we need for this is we need an order number. We'll name it order number, and we'll create this field. It's going to be, now we can actually sort of edit this and make it out to be a formula. Thank you. We can edit this and make it out to be a formula, and the formula for this is going to be something very simple, right? So error, and to the right of this we want to add the digits, but we are going to make sure that they are the digits from the order number, and we're going to format it so that it's three decimals. Okay, let me not break this. Airtable formulas are very interesting in their own way. This might break. Yeah, this totally broke. So it's probably something having to do with this. And yeah, this might be fine now. Okay, now it's fine. So now what we want to do is we want to log, because understand that there is a bunch of information here that we want to use. Like as I said, it's very useful information of this URL. So we want to log the workflow URL, I guess. We'll edit this field, and we'll go ahead and we'll say this is the workflow URL. We'll go ahead and we'll find the URL type of field, and then yeah, we'll say this. And then let's go ahead and change this. What other information are we trying to log? So the timestamp is very useful as well. um, does it just have the timestamp, or is there another type of time? No, it just has that timestamp. Okay, so I guess we will do that. We will log the error timestamp. And again, you might be wondering what those numbers are. Actually, those numbers, it's very simple to convert those numbers to a datetime representation. We might go through that at a later time, but yeah, it's very simple. So the what we're logging right now is the timestamp, and it's just the value of number. So number over here, and then we'll save this. What else do we try to log? It's the parameters over here. So we want to log the error message. And again, if you had an error code set up, it would probably come through there, so you could log that too. But we'll edit this field, and then actually we'll leave the status because the status is very useful. We'll just edit the parameters of the status instead. What we want here is we want to check if we've resolved the error, so it's unresolved or it's resolved. Or if it's just an automation, we want to have it be like a sort of a success or something. And the default here is going to be unresolved. So yeah, that's going to be the default. And then I guess I can hide this one because it's not very useful to just have it out and about. We're going to be saving the error message, as I said before. So we don't need attachments for this, we can just get rid of that. Error message is going to be single line text. We don't need a default value, we can just get it through automations. And then we might want to save this error stack as well. So let's do that. What I like to do here is I like to duplicate the field because it makes it very simple to just keep going. I'm going to set this as long text, and I'm going to have the error stack here. Okay, perfect. So I'll save this. And this is like looking very, very fine. And what we want to do next is we want to actually bring in the data into the Airtable. What I like to do is I like to rename these just to make them all make sense to me. So I'm going to be setting this a log error. I'll rename this. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect to the right table. So it's errors and automations. And it's going to fetch the columns perfect. And then I'm going to just map these over here. So I'm going to map the workflow URL. I'm going to map the timestamp. Brilliant. I'm going to map the error message. And I'm going to take this one actually. And then I'm going to map the error stack, which funnily enough is text. If you were trying to like get the error stack in any other way, you would have had to do like two JSON string or something. Like there are moments where you would have had to do that, but yeah, we don't have to think of the status right now. This is fine. We're going to log the error. If I test this step, it's going to appear in the Airtable. Boom, perfect. So now you have a method of actually sort of logging an error in the Airtable with the correct timestamp, with the error message and the error stack, so that you can look at it through. You can look through it later on, and then be able to resolve it yourself. Another field you could have here is like a notes field, where you actually just write notes on like how you resolved it, maybe for future reference or something. You'd also probably also like have more fields as well, just to track not only errors but automations as well, how they went, what happened, and so on and so forth. So as I said before, what we want to do next after logging the error is we want to send a message to us. So we want to send an email. And since I have a Gmail account and I already have the Google credentials set up, I don't need to think too much about that. I can just set that up very, very quickly. I'm going to send a message to myself. And yeah, it's obviously just me. So I guess I'll put in my email over here. By the way, you can totally use this email to like send me any queries or requests or whatever. I'll try to answer them as quickly as I possibly can. But yeah, the subject is going to be error in sort of content transformer, since this was the base that we're using to cache the errors, right? I'm going to put an exclamation point right there. I mean, obviously you could customize this like as you wish, but yeah, the email type is going to be HTML, but we could just send a text. I guess text is fine. If you wanted to like have different color schemes or whatever, you could use HTML. That's fine too. What we want to do here is we want to send in the most useful information. So we are going to tell ourselves that you had an error at and you could send in the timestamp over here, but something you could do here as well is you could just turn this into an expression and then sort of send in the time right now, which is like a very interesting thing. It's going to send in the datetime expression. You could format this in different ways, but yeah, it's very useful. So now we're telling ourselves that we had an error at this time, and you need to go check it out. You need to check it out ASAP, right? So that seems to be okayish, I guess. ASAP. Okay, perfect. What we're going to do is we're going to say here are more details on this, and then we're going to send in the error message. If you had an error code here, you could totally do that, but we're just going to map in the error message over here. We're going to map in maybe the status as well, because it's very useful to just have that. And then we're going to map in the workflow URL, just so that someone can like read it from the email, and then they can just go ahead and just like work on the workflow itself just from a link in the email. So yeah, this is perfect now. No need to include the error stack. If someone wants the error stack, they can just find it in the Airtable, but something useful might be including the Airtable record ID. If you know the Airtable base ID and the Airtable field ID, you could just include those as well. But yeah, here, since we know that everything is being logged anyway, we can just leave this as is. And we can just send this email to ourselves. So send email notification email. And yeah, this is it. When we send this, it's going to give us, boom, a thread ID, which is useful if you want to give replies or whatever. We could store this thread ID. We could store the ID. We could do a lot with this. Like now, I hope you understand the power of this. Like this is very useful. Imagine if you had different kinds of error messages here, then you could have like logical splits. You could have like a switch. You could switch between error messages. You could switch between error codes. You could do something where you retry after a certain amount of time. Like you could literally have an execute. You can have an execute node, sort of an execute subworkflow node here that effectively just goes back and then retries that. Or you can have like a webhook here that does that. Like the possibilities are endless, and it's very useful to understand all of this when you're trying to build things that work even when they break. Build things that you don't have to constantly just be looking through every single time. So yeah. So just wrap up. Automation is more about preparation than anything else. Like you don't want to build perfect systems. You want to build systems that work whether you're there or not, right? You want to turn your workflows into resilient warriors that fight for you, and you want to build so that you have the confidence to like walk away and leave everything with a non-technical person, because like that's probably what you're going to be dealing with. You're going to be dealing with clients who don't really have technical expertise. You want to build and then leave them with the confidence that they can handle anything that happens, whether you're there or not. So yeah, I'm sure you're ready to dive deeper. I know I am. So next time we're going to be looking at module 3. You're going to be finding out what that is. We're going to be just diving deeper into some slightly advanced concepts, and I know I'm going to see you there. So see you there.